Hey everybody, I'm Trisha Shortino, the CEO of Belay. Happy to be with you today. I have a special guest with me today, Dave Richards. Dave, it is so good to have you here. Dave is the CEO of Elite Performance Associates. Hey Dave.
Hey Trisha, how are you? Good morning.
I'm great. Good morning. So good to have you. So Dave and I have known each other for a few years, and we connected a couple weeks ago. And Dave had mentioned to me a little bit about a new concept he's been working on called PPP. And it was brilliant. And I'm so excited to talk through that today. But before we get started, Dave, I'd love for you to tell us a little bit about yourself, your organization, what you do, and then we will jump right into this awesome content.
Oh, that sounds great. Fantastic. Thank you, Trish. And I'm honored, and it's just great to be with you. So hopefully we'll be able to kind of go through some things that might be of value for different business owners and leaders across the nation. So it'll be a fun time. So again, my name is Dave Richards. I'm CEO and lead coach for Elite Performance Associates. It's a company that I built a little bit over 2 years ago after 24 years plus in the financial industries. Loved coaching. That was always a part of my heart. And so went and launched a coaching consulting company at that particular time. So I work with business owners and CEOs, executive teams for different organizations, primarily in the real estate world, but also other industries wide too. So.
Yes, awesome. So glad to have you with us today. I know you were doing so much good out there, supporting leaders and CEOs, and I've been so impressed with you. And so I'm really excited to, dive into this conversation about pivoting our businesses and walking through a PPP concept. So why don't you kind of tell us a little bit about your concept, how it came about, and get us intrigued.
Right, you betcha, absolutely. Well, I think as obviously we've got unprecedented times right now, and so during this time, really, I think a lot of individuals, a lot of us, though, you kind of question where are we going? What do we do, right? And a lot of individuals find themselves freezing in these particular challenging times that we've got. And so with that, as I work through and coach different executives and owners, though. It was really important for me to pivot, for me to look for ways to adapt and be able to slide in and help them move and navigate through the storms that were really caused from this pandemic. And so making sure that we put ourselves in the best point. I'd love to share my screen if you're okay with it, because one of the things that we do that really start with is kind of a future model that kind of frames out why we need to make the pivots we need to make, which then moves us into that PPP model that we go through. Is that cool to do?
Yeah, I love it. And I totally, I get what you're saying. People kind of step into that fight or flight position. We have human nature tells us whether we're going to run to our problems or be stuck. So I love conceptually getting things out there to leaders who feel maybe stuck and frozen and they don't know their next step. So I'd love you to share your screen and kind of walk us through that.
Perfect. Very cool. Well, here we go. There we go. All right. So really, when we think about where we're at currently, we've got our current events that we're at, and we're obviously, 5 or so weeks outside of when things really started getting disruption. We've got a lot of challenges, a lot of things that are happening, though, but we're in this now part. And as leaders, though, when we think about it, we're really, in our businesses, are really going to be on one of 3 lines when we think about from now to the future part. I put this line to the right of the now part, and that's kind of that survival line. And a lot of individuals right now, when I think about leaders in the conversations that I'm in, are just trying to hold their breath maybe, and they're just trying to hopefully just figure out, how do I survive through this? And they're just, again, putting their head in the sand maybe and just thinking, well, when this passes over, then we'll try to get back to some kind of a normalcy that goes through, and really kind of being fear-based within their activities. And when you think about those fear-based and a lack of activity that's there, really what they're going to be on is this line of trajectory that is really kind of swinging downward for their business itself. Because I think when I think back into the history of things, you got major disruptions that have happened. And so the likelihood of us getting back and there being a light switch in regards to things kind of turning back on is just not that great when you listen to most professionals as they're talking through, and medical professionals through this. And so this idea that I'm going to, close off, I'm going to restrict, I'm going to kind of fall into this fear mindset that goes through, and really just kind of hope that I survive through, will really lead into this downward trajectory for themselves and for their business, and really just be up to the winds of the storm itself that kind of comes through. I think about the third, go ahead.
Yeah, I was going to say it's very easy to let the news and the information and emotions get the best of you, and really put you personally maybe in a downward feeling spiral, and then your business follows.
Right? I mean, you don't even think about it. I think a lot of times this downward trajectory, you don't really think through kind of what's going on or where your activities. I think a lot of us have felt, our routines maybe get disrupted, and all these other parts of it that kind of come into play that just, again, we don't even realize it, but we're just swinging down in what's happening. So that second line, though, that a lot of leaders fall themselves, they realize they got to do something, but they don't really know what to do. And they just kind of react maybe, and really kind of get into this unfocused, activity. They're really just all over the map. And sometimes they're engaged, sometimes they're not, but they're back and forth within that. When I think about that line, right, you're going to go through, it's going to be really an up and down type deal. It's going to be very chaotic. You're going to, again, this up down of emotions are going to hit. And really, it's uncertain in terms of what's going to happen, right? In regards to things, but they're focused in on, again, just kind of like, what do I do?
Hyperactivity, crash and burn. Hyperactivity, crash and burn.
Yes.
Yeah.
A lot of times I describe it, they try to match pace with pace, right? So they move into things and they're trying to run as fast as they can to try to catch up on the treadmill, but they never can do it, right? And so again, they do that and they're exhausted. Like you said, they just, hyperactivity, crash, and then it just kind of brings into this wavy, rough ride that they're going to look into. The third line that I think that obviously that is available, right, for leaders, right, that's there, is this upward line, right? And it's the one that is focused on strategy. It's the one that is focused in on taking the time and assessing things and really looking at focused activities, creating pivots in the business or pivots within themselves of where and what do they need to be on the outside. So I'm going to focus on an intentional outcome driven from that. And so when I think about that, you've got this third line that is going to swing out. Now, one of the things that you may or may not notice, though, within it is that if you think about or you look at on the front end, there's really not going to be a whole lot of difference between where things are at. And so that's where we're at right now, right? Is it's really hard to distinguish at this point who are those that are just panic stricken, right? Their heads in the sand and they don't really know what to do. They're starting to kind of move away. Those that are unfocused in terms of their activities, and then those that are actually taking a strategic approach and moving forward and leading forward on that, that's there. But you'll see.
Right, so like all things created equal kind of at this moment in time.
Yes, exactly. And then we start seeing that separation as time goes through. And, right now we're probably a little bit further around in terms of the down the line towards the survival line. And you're starting to see, right, that parting that's happening. Now, one of the
who's
things
surviving, who's thriving and surviving, and who's not.
That's exactly right. One of the other interesting things that I think really is what I love, right, and that is leadership. And I think that when I think about the differences between these two lines, the difference between where the green ends up and where the red ends up really is leadership, right? It's the action of leadership, of how we step in and fill this void or fill this area for our teams, for our families, for our communities, and lead through really will be the determining factor between where we end up from a green or versus a red perspective that's there. So.
Yeah, and I think a lot of us leaders, feel that, right? Like you feel that you are responsible. At least I know I do. I'm responsible to fill that gap. I have a team of people, I have organization, clients, all the things that are counting on me and my leaders to be able to be in the green and not fall into the red.
No doubt, right? There's this weight that is placed upon us where all eyes seem to be looking at us, right? From that. And I think, it's great. It's a great point though to make, Tricia, that in talking with a lot of leaders, I think that a lot of times that they just assume that my team knows what they need to be doing right now. And we'll talk a little bit more about that later on. But what I encourage obviously leaders to do is you've got to get in, right? You've got to go to your teams and help them understand. Because with this disruption, sometimes our team members are a little kind of scattered, right? Their home life has been maybe disrupted. Maybe they have a spouse that may be challenged with a job or so. Maybe their children's at home and they've never had a homeschool before. Whatever it may be, there's a lot of disruption happening. And we don't realize, we just think that they should know what to do. And we just sit back and we'll keep doing what you're doing. But we really need to make sure we're coming in to lead them through this. So
yeah, like increased communication, increased micro goals or micro tasks to help just give them the baby steps that they might not have maybe needed before.
That's exactly right. Exactly.
Yes, right. Love it. Yes. Great concept. So very true. People, especially those of our team members who are maybe more of the frozen type, really are looking to us to help them take those baby steps as leaders.
That's exactly right. And I think that's where, as leaders, we have to take responsibility and ownership that the line, right? Number one, what line am I on? What line am I leading on? And number two, what line is going to best serve myself, my team, the community, and so on, and making that conscious decision to make the shifts or the pivots that are necessary to get on the right line.
Love it. That's
perfect
great stuff, Dave.
Well, Trish, that leads to that PPP, right? And so really, when I think about, and I kind of created this diagram, I turned a triangle upside down, and so I'm going to share my screen again, but really to kind of create this sense of understanding that we have to utilize pivots. So there's these pivots that we need to make and assess and look at in order to protect and in order to profit, right? So there's this direction. And I think we all would agree right now, as I think about the current environment that we're in, we've got a lot of downward pressures that are happening to our business, right? We've got a lot of information overload. I saw a recent statistic that over a third of Facebook users are online, over 80% more than what they typically are. That's there. So there's a lot of consumption happening is what I think the point is. So we've got a lot of these downward trends or downward pressures within our community, right? There's a lot of uncertainty where this is going to happen, or where are we going to end up with this from maybe a global economy, from a national economy, 30 million unemployment claims, the unemployment rate is increasing significantly. So there's just a lot of these winds of uncertainties that are downward pressurizing our teams, our families, and specifically our businesses, right, in what we're responsible for. And so with that, we can either respond, like we talked about earlier in terms of those lines, we could just kind of hope that we make it, or we can actually look at what do I need to do differently? Where are the changes in order for me to drive and grow, right, from an outward to kind of move past those items from it? And so with that, one of the things is I kind of created this that came to my mind, and a book that I love was from Jim Collins, and it's Great by Choice. So a lot of people know his book, Good to Great. A lot of people do know about Great by Choice. I love it. And one of the areas that he points out is this productive paranoia, and specifically the zoom out and zoom in concept that goes through it. And I think when I think about this pivot, and specifically starting with the protect pivot, we have to understand that human psyche, it's very difficult for me to get in an offensive mindset of how can I lead change in my organization if myself, I'm really grappling and struggling in my mind, or just the challenges mentally, right, in regards to what's going on, or if I see struggles and the challenges within my people, my team, my family that's there, and then even financially. I think a lot of times we think about, hey, we need to make these decisions or we need to go forward, but if I'm constantly thinking about how am I going to cover payroll, or how am I going to cover expenses that are there, very difficult to move myself into that mindset and capitalize whenever I'm still kind of stuck on that. So I always like to start with the pivoting to protect aspect. And there's
sorry, I was going to say, I feel like as a leader of an organization of people, that people are really looking to hear words that make them to feel safe, that there's safety, and that I find myself as I'm leading our team, even as an example, trying to be mindful that as the leader of an organization, and if I care about my team, that helping them feel safe in this environment at work and all the things is crucial for them to feel comfortable and to be successful.
That's exactly right. I mean, that's that responsibility that we have as leaders. And actually, the segue of the first one is critical. And I think a lot of times as leaders, especially those that have this servant heart that we really want to serve, we want to jump into the foxhole, jump into the trench, right, to help out. But we've got to also understand that it starts with protecting, right, and the pivot to protect myself, right, and my mindset that's there, and taking inventory specifically of what's the information I'm consuming. Am I a part of that 30% that's on Facebook that's just being pulled into, or any other social media outlet that's there, that's just being pushed and pulled into other people's agendas or other people's thoughts that are there? Or am I am I making sure that I'm informed, which is important, but I'm being informed by sites that are going to help me make better decisions and get my mindset right in terms of where things are focused. And so, specifically taking inventory of myself and how and what pivots do I need to make in myself, right, so that I can best lead my team themselves. So that are there.
You can't give what you don't have yourself.
Right? When your glass is empty, there's nothing else, right? You got nothing else that's there. And I think that one of the other parts that comes there, and I'm sure you feel this too, right? As leaders, everything seems to feel like it takes like 2 to 3 times more energy to accomplish, right? Every conversation, every move or decision, the weight and the feeling is that it just takes so much more time and energy to get through. That, man, at the end of the day, I just am exhausted, right? It is difficult, right? At the end of that day that's there. And so it's important to make sure we start the day properly with the right mindset so that we've got fuel left in the tank, so to speak. So,
yes, love it.
Perfect. That second pivot in regards to, the pivot to protect is really, I like to call it my peeps, right? Because it really is not just for my family, but it's also my team, right? It's those people that we talked about earlier that are really looking to us for guidance, looking to us for, just assurance and stability and again, security during these particular times. And so what we need to do is look for, how do I pivot to protect my peeps? You spoke of one of the most important things, and that is we have to actually step in and over communicating more, right? As a leader that's there. We think that they know what to do. We think that, hey, you know what? No news is good news, right? Those type of things. But in these particular times, our peeps are looking for guidance, and that includes our family and our teams that are there. And so increasing that frequency is critical, as we see. That third, right, pivot, I think, and I kind of alluded to it earlier when I started with the whole protection part, because from a mental perspective, if I don't have a strong zoomed out approach, right, of looking at the financials, then guess what? It's very difficult for me from a mindset, for my own sake, for my people, and so on. And obviously looking at more of an offensive strategy, it's very difficult to get there if I'm constantly being dragged and reminded of, oh my gosh, what's going to happen? And so one of the things, Tricia, that I put together, it's a real simplistic model. A lot of individuals may have financial teams that certainly can kind of make it, certainly dress it up and use other parts of it. But I put together a triage tool that if anybody wants to have, I can send it out. It's just an Excel spreadsheet, or they can reach out and get it from you guys directly. But basically,
we can have it as a download with this webinar.
Fantastic. But it's a simple model, right? It's a simple Excel spreadsheet. It takes into account the cash, right, that the organization has, the revenue lines, right? And so I use some general line items that are revenue that are coming in along with the expenses. And it takes a look at it and helps create what's my runway as an organization from a cash flow, from again, my revenue versus expense line and the cash that we have, and making some assumptions, maybe if I'm going to drop in revenue potential or whatever, how do we look at that? And the second part of that is I think that all of us need to, again, zoom out and specifically look at our expenses. And there's some opportunities right now for us to look at every expense that's coming into our organization and really look at those things that we need to keep, those things that we can eliminate. Maybe there's a lot of duplicate type things. It's funny when we go through these conversations and we really look at line items. I can't tell you how many times we've seen duplicate accounts where we're buying the same account like 2 or 3 times, and we've got this amount that's coming through that we just don't even know, right? I think I had 2 Netflix accounts. I'm embarrassed to say it, but I had 2 different Netflix accounts. It was just pulling out. I had no clue, but when we take that chance to really zoom and look at that, it really allows us to find some opportunities to eliminate. And then the third one that I would say is there's some opportunity for us to renegotiate some terms in regards to some of the expenses that we have, but really kind of working through it. And then it helps kind of formulate what are some potential savings in regards to that sheet, that financial triage sheet that's there. But looking at that is important as a leader because that's going to help me make the right decisions at the right time that's
Right.
there.
Yes. Yeah, absolutely. And I feel like those are some of the things that we've worked through as an organization as well is financial review, trying not to overreact.
Yes.
We didn't like the day the world shut down, we didn't go slash everything. I mean, we tried to be very strategic, review, and then make wise decisions, because we have seen some people on the other side of that go into panic mode and start cutting things. And we wanted to be mindful to not kind of cut off our nose to spite ourselves, so to spite our face, and just be like super strategic to your point, and try not be reactionary.
Absolutely, right? You should create stages, right? So this is our first stage from maybe a financial stewardship to see what can we do that we can go through. To your point, though, you need to understand the difference between an expense and an investment, because a lot of times what I see is we just immediately want to erase and delete things, and that includes even individuals and people, where we need to think about that to find out, is that something that, again, is going to create kind of this self-fulfilling prophecy, so to speak, right, that's going to move us down. So thinking through that. Jim says in that book, again, that not all time is equal. And I think that that's where you're giving yourselves that opportunity to make the right decisions at the right time. And I think that's critical, to it. So.
Absolutely. Perfect.
So those are the 3 areas that I think, kind of the lens of looking at what are the pivots that I need to, of course, protect that's there. Once I've got this in alignment and I've kind of got a strong strategy, even, or a thought process, I've got a control over maybe what I'm consuming. I've got a great sequence and kind of rhythm going with my team in regards to communication. And I feel strong with kind of where we're at on financials, and wherever that picture is, it is going to allow me to make the right decisions at the right time, which is the most important part of it, right? That's there. That's when now I can move to looking at what are the pivots to profit, right? And opportunities that are there. One of the things that, you think about historically, right, is that more innovative, incredible organizations and candidly more wealth has been generated from disrupted, recessionary type situations or times, disruptions in history, right, that's there. And so with that, it is this difference, right, between the line choice that we talked about earlier that determines whether we can actually move, right, and make the right pivots to actually profit, to actually make our organizations, ourselves, and our teams better, right, and our communities better, from that standpoint.
Yeah, it's like looking for what are the right changes to prosper.
Yes.
At any stage, especially right now, he's like, you're either growing or declining. You're either changing or dying. So we kind of always say, evolve. We want to constantly evolve. This is a great moment in time for everybody's to think through the evolution of the future of their business based on the state of the world and the economy, what could we be doing differently so that we can be a different, evolved version of ourselves in the future?
Exactly, right. And I think, there's some organizations or some industries right now that may not necessarily be feeling the same. And so they may think, oh, there's no pivoting that I need to make, right, in the profit. But I will tell you, every single organization, right, I look at the pivoting to profit, you really have kind of 3 levels of pivoting, right, that's there. You've got the minor, kind of the small pivots. And I'll give you an example. I think, you think about the marketing aspect, or maybe kind of the beginnings of your company. If you haven't pivoted your content or your messaging to the customers out there, you are like numb. You are way out of touch, right?
Irrelevant, right? You become irrelevant.
Yes.
Can't be irrelevant.
Yes, you see it. I've seen it where all of a sudden you get this post out there that was obviously created months ago that says, hey, get outside and give somebody a hug. Really? I mean, with social distancing, come on, where are you at, right? And so if you haven't taken a chance or taken the opportunity, of course, to make the pivoting of your content, of your messaging to your clients, to be out there for people to serve and look for that, you're missing the boat, right, in regards to it. So that may be an example of like a small pivot that we need to make sure that we're looking at and going through. That next level is there may be some opportunities for maybe, maybe it might be a little bit of a shift in regards to maybe a program or a service that's there. A great example would be is restaurants, right, that are out there that didn't have takeout as a part of, their menu that's there. Well, guess what? If you're
a restaurant, do now.
Right, they do now. Exactly.
Or if they don't, right? They didn't pivot. Right?
Yes. I mean, if you haven't made that pivot where it's like, hey, guys, we're open, we're here to serve, what can we do, right? And make that move over to more takeout. And how do I communicate that to my clients? How am I getting the message out that I'm available, we're here? That's a critical thing, right? That might be a new program or a new opportunity that comes about this. And there's that would be an example of kind of that mid area where maybe there's a program or an offering as an organization that I need to kind of work on or go to answer the call, right? For things and look for those opportunities as an organization to pivot. And then there's the third, right? And we don't like talking about the third because sometimes the third is an overhaul, right? It's a major pivot within organizations or industries that are out there. And so there are some industries out there that, there's a big shift or a big change that's going on that we may need to make a bigger pivot in regards to it, to put ourselves at a better position on the other side of this once we're through, because it will pass, right? We all know this will pass. It's going to be, obviously the timeline that's there, but it will pass. So.
Yes, love it. Great. Gosh, such good stuff, Dave. If everybody could just follow everything you said, I feel like we all would be better off in the future than we are maybe today. Yeah. And I really do hope that people can look to themselves, make the pivots that they need to make for their people. I love how you call them the peeps. And themselves, which I think was a really great reminder through all of this, is that first we have to take care of ourselves before we can even kind of walk through this process to come out on the other side.
That's exactly right. I mean, and I think from a crisis leadership, right, when you think about that part, I think we talked a little bit about it earlier, but one of the things, again, our people are looking to us. And during this time, what I find in some of the conversations I've been on the phone or in the Zoom call with that leader, that we can get a little vulnerable. And it's like, how do I communicate certainty when there's uncertainty all around us? I don't know when this is going to be over. I don't know how this is going to impact. I don't know whether, my business or our business is going to be able to sustain this. How do I create certainty? And I think one of the things that I would encourage leaders is that you can create certainty in uncertain times. Own it. And the first step is really creating what's the best next step for us as an organization and for our individuals, for our teams to take. When I think about, again, you look at this overall, a lot of times a lot of people, a lot of us kind of work off of either annual or quarterly plans. And right now, guess what? If you're thinking about driving and leading from your 2020 vision and your 2020 or plan that's there, you're missing the boat, right? In regards to what your team needs. And so a lot of times we'll call like quarterly goals rocks. This is where what I would encourage leaders to do is to step into the pebbles and to the sand of the plan itself, and helping people see the daily and even the weekly goals where they need to take the steps to go forward. Because if I can create certainty of the next best step where my team steps on a firm ground, this next step, then it brings confidence, trust, and faith that when I take the next step, it's going to land on strong ground, and the next step and the next step. And that's what's going to lead us through, right, that time, that survive, that mark that is passed. And we're going to be able to create that certainty for the team itself. So when we get into that void of communicating, right, and sharing, and we think, I don't have anything, I don't know what we're going to do, revert to what are the sands and the pebbles that we need to be focused on.
Yeah, and I think for a lot of leaders that probably sounds counterintuitive, because as leaders of large organizations, we're trying to stay out of those things, or we have before, where we are more strategic, high level. We are focused on quarterly and year-long accomplishments and goals and KPIs and all of those things,
right,
where taking the shift to really focusing to the very short term, which is what you would tell normally a leader not to do.
Right, it does.
Focusing on the short term now more than ever, so important. I love how you talk about specifically just to help build the team's confidence. Like if we can get through this week and accomplish the things we set out for the week, then we can feel more confident that next week will be a great week. And the next thing you know, the weeks start building on each other and you've had a successful month. So I love it.
That's great. Yeah, no, that's spot on, right? And I think, and we don't stay there long, right? As leaders, we shouldn't stay or camp out here long, but we do it long enough to build confidence in creating momentum. What I like to share with leaders though, is your number one job is to maintain and create momentum within the organization. And that's right now where we've got to be focused in on to start that momentum shift to making sure that we're moving forward, as organizations, as leaders, for our people. So.
Yes, Dave, this has been great. This has been a great conversation. I'm so glad you've been with us today. I'm so glad this information is going to get out there to the world. Thank you so much for spending your time with us.
Thank you, Tricia. I appreciate the time. Love Belay. I'm a client. You guys got to check them out. And you guys do a phenomenal job serving leaders and just folks across the nation. So thank you for all that you do.
Thank you. And guys, we will share Dave's information, Elite Performance Associates, amazing coaches, great leadership coaching. Check them out. Thanks, everybody.